Okay, we're going to get going. Thank you all so much for joining another Search Discovery Education Community session. Today's session will be in the area of Adobe Analytics. So before we get into the content, just a couple housekeeping items we're going to go through. For those of you who are new to the Search Discovery Education Community, we are a free community that basically is trying to provide education around 12 topic areas related to digital analytics and digital marketing. You could see those on the screen now. There's no sales, no marketing, just weekly webinars on topics that you might be interested in. If you haven't joined already, I'm going to be posting a link to the chat that will allow you to easily join. Just takes a couple seconds to fill out the form. Right now, we just crossed 3,600 members today, which is really cool. We're in 84 countries and 960 cities. So we're trying to get up to 1,000 cities. And we're over 2,700 people in this particular channel related to Adobe Analytics. If you or coworkers aren't already in it and you think they should join, we have an unlimited capacity. So there's a link there that I've put. It's an easy shortcut link to remember, but I'm also going to be posting into the chat right now all of the information that you need. Next slide. So right now we are having one minor problem. We only have about 2/3 of you in the SDEC Slack group, which makes me really sad. That means that you are missing out, a third of you are missing out on 44 past recorded webinars. You can't DM and chat in Slack with other people who are in the SDEC. You can't see job postings and so on. So if you are not in the Slack group, but you are in the SDEC, please join the Slack group as soon as you can. And I'm even putting a link in the chat right now. So you have no excuse that if you click on that link, it literally takes about 5 seconds. So I'm hoping to get at least 100 people to join the Slack group right now. And lastly, as we go through the webinar today, if you have any technical problems, please use the chat. If you have any questions for our presenters, please don't use the chat. Please use the Zoom Q&A, and that makes it much easier for us to do questions at the end. So that's all I wanted to say. Welcome, and with that, I'm going to turn it over to Ben and Julian.
All right, great. Thanks, Adam. Appreciate the opportunity to share what we're doing. Me and Julian have been prepping for this. When did we start, Julian? Back in October or September or something like that last year?
Yeah, exactly.
When we
2020.
started walking through this. Yeah. So what we're going to do is just do some introductions. Then we'll do some demo and use cases, and then we want to go over the open source options that Julian and I have both been working on. With R and Python, but obviously there's other ramifications with what we're talking about on other open source languages. We want to keep it as quick as possible so that we can get through some of the questions and get to some of the questions and have a good discussion on those. So we'll try and work through that pretty quick. But I think there is some introductions that I think we need to go through. So Julian, who are you?
Yeah. Yes. So I'm Julian Piccini, and I'm a consultant at Adobe. So I'm not part of the API team. So to make things clear, so I'm not paid to do that. We'll talk about that later. But I'm mostly a consultant for analytics, launch, audience manager, and now the new solution IP, Adobe Experience Platform. So I do have a blog, and I'm a creator of several API packages in Python, one for analytics that we are going to present today, one for launch, the audience manager, and basically every solution I have, I do have a Python module for it. So yeah.
And my name is Ben Woodard. I'm a data scientist at Search Discovery. I am Adobe Analytics certified, but also the author and maintainer of Adobe Analytics R, which is in the process of launching and hopefully going to CRAN soon. So that's a little bit about us. Let's get into what we're here for, which is the 2.0 API. And we need to level set. And so we want to play a little game here. And this, unfortunately, probably took me longer than most. But can you see the two differences? I always love these because you want to look at two different things. You want to pick it out, right? Be critical. And as analysts, it's easy to do. And so as we go through this, you'll see a couple items. I'll give you about 5 more seconds. and then I'm going to give it away. These are the ones I could find. You might be able to find some more. So, but here's the deal: is that we're talking about the new Adobe Analytics API 2.0. We want to compare it with 1.4 if you've been using it at all, and you just can't do that. 2.0 is a totally different API. So you're going to see the differences. We're going to talk through the differences, but we don't want to compare them because the use cases that we'll have many times have an application 1.4, but they're different. And we don't want to waste time, especially as analysts, we can do that. We don't want to waste time going through those details. In fact, the way we're going to look at it is these things are totally different. So we're going to point out some differences. We're going to ask that question and answer it, hopefully for a little bit in just a shallow form. But just to give you the framework of how the new API can be used with Adobe. So the first thing, and this is the biggest thing, I'm coming at it from more of a consultancy and working with different clients across the way. And using the old API, I was able to get access using web services, so a secret key and a username, and I was able to get access to a company's report suites. But I had to get approved through web services. Now with the new API, it's an OAuth or a JWT access, so authorization. So therefore, we have access through the developer project into the different companies that I'm associated with. Now, I know if you work in-house, you may have separate company accounts as well, and so this will be incredibly helpful for you. You may not even notice a difference if you're in-house and you only have one company with Adobe Analytics that you work with or the account that you work under. But this does help the consultant get to access all the other resources within those report suites. So that's one big change that has really been beneficial over the last couple of months as I've been using the new API.
Okay. On this slide, we can see that there is a two different way that those API works in order to retrieve data. In the old way, so the API 1.4, you actually push your request to the server, and the server then handle that request for you. So it was the old way, it was the easy way, but it was not very flexible because there is only 2 or 4, if I remember correctly, 4 different breakdowns that you could have done. It was really based on the old report API, so report and analytics for the one that Adam, Ben, and I are for Adobe Analytics for a long time. There was this report and analytics setups, and this was based on top of that. For the new API, the API 2.0, then it changed completely. Now we have a pull method directly. So the requests that you send, you will see are more granular, they are more flexible, and the response is now immediate. So you don't have to wait for the result before it was in the queue that you have to listen and check regularly to see if the results are arriving. And now you would directly pull the data from your request. And we will see more detail on the next slide on what changed exactly. And it's also changed on the endpoint. So it's not like an upgrade of the old API. It's completely changed. As I said, 2 different systems, one from report and analytics and the new one on workspace. You need to remember that at the end of the call, I believe. So looking at the 1.4 API, we can see that there was extensive endpoint that you could use. So if you wanted to manage the report suite, the marketing channel, or request data warehouse report or classification, you could do all of this in the old API. And though these capabilities are not really managed now in the 2.0, it will come. Most likely, it will come in the future. But there is no feature parity regarding that. But as we said, you can do a lot more. It's much more complex, and the format of the request is much more complex, and you can do a lot more flexible requests from there. There is also additional things that are coming now, and we will not cover them directly in the call, but you can have a look at the documentation, and those are the bulk data insertion API. So some of you may have heard or may are familiar with the data insertion, and now you can do that in a bulk way. And there is also the data repair API that has been added. So you can actually delete data from your analytics instance from the API. I think that's mostly it. We won't go into much detail, and you are more likely to like it further.
Yeah, and I think we talked through this slide, Julian. The 1.4 has some capabilities still that are still being used, and in fact, the recommendation from Adobe is if it's not available in 2.0, well then use the 1.4. It's still stable, it's still being somewhat maintained, but it's not being advanced. And now with the 2.0, it is the future of what Adobe is pushing. You also have the capabilities with the idea of what you can do in Analysis Workspace and that UI. You have that capability now with the 2.0 because it's based on that API structure. And so if you enjoy doing something and you just like to do it more, would like to do it by joining other data sets, and you can't do it inside Workspace, well, you'll be able to pull it out and pull that data similar ways. So there's some differences there. That's hopefully setting the good stage for where we're headed. So Julian, you ready?
Yes, I
All
am.
right, cool.
Let's
So
play
we're going to
it.
go through some use cases. This is the list of items that we're going to be trying to go through. We're going to try and go through them as quick as possible. We want to definitely get to the questions, but we definitely want to show the capabilities of the API and the current infrastructure that we have set up. Julian has unfortunately developed in Python, and I have been developing, fortunately, in R. So we're not fighting against each other. It's not a competition. Obviously, there's never a competition between R and Python, but you obviously have many other capabilities of using the API. We're just going to show these two use cases. So Julian, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you and let you share your screen.
Yeah. Yep. I'm going to take over that. Share my screen. I hope you can see my screen.
Yep, sure can.
Okay. So we will not go over the very basic setup on this, how to set up the console.adobe.io and all of this setup for connecting to the API. I think there are a very good video about it on the official Adobe setup. Also, Ben has very good documentation, and I have even better in Python documentation, as you can imagine. So we are going directly into the code now on Python. So I hope you are at least familiar with what Jupyter Notebook is and the way you can use that in my Python setup and module is to call directly. So Adobe Analytics 2 for the 2.0, so R Analytics. And I will put it as API 2 because I'm very lazy and I don't want to write everything again. And for some other reason, I'm importing another module. And that API now, once you have it, the first thing you want to do is to import some configuration files. So you have a configuration with some information you have set up in your Adobe connector for this API. So you do that directly here. And just to showcase and to be transparent about what is in my config, I just printed it here. So you see that I have some org ID, my API key, my take ID, some secret, and my path to the key.
Hey, Julian, can
Then,
you zoom in on your screen a little bit?
yeah, I can definitely do that. Up. It's very good. I hope it's better now. Up.
Yeah, that looks good.
So once you have done that, you have all the available connectivity to retrieve information from the Analytics API. And the first thing you want to do is to create a logging connection. That is, we'll see that it's a discover me. Ben will show you more on this on his use case. This create a direct connection to get your company ID. This is important because sometimes you may not be aware of that, but some companies have several Adobe Analytics companies. So in my case, I do have only one, but some have several. So you want to pick the one you are interested in, and then you select your company ID here, and you create your analytics directly analytics instance that will connect to your company inside. So you can have several ones for each of your different companies. Then the first use case we want to show is the user. So you can get all of the user directly, and it returns. So most of my API returns data frame when it's possible. You can also change that format if you want or if you wish. I will print here the first 5 elements of my user. that they are not very useful, but the most interesting thing is that I can then look at my last access status, so the user that have last access, reverse order. So I can have a look, and I can see that Marie Duval I actually logged in last time in 2019. So I should probably, for example, delete that user, or at least inform me about why she's not connecting anymore. Now I will pass over to Ben, and we will show you some cool capability you can do on R as well, or you can do that. Passing over.
All right, trying to be super fast about this. Yeah, so the authentication with R uses a different authentication. It's OAuth. It's not the JWT integration as Julian was showing. And so what you'll need to do is create the Adobe project, which again on adobeanalyticsr.com, I have the demonstration on how to do that. It takes less than 60 seconds. It's a quick 1, 2, 3 process, and you're able to get the client ID and client secret. And when you do that, then you'll save it to the .r environ folder. I have a sample folder of the way it would look. And what you do is you would save these two variables, restart your session, and then you're able to authenticate. And when you authenticate, you pull in the token, which gives you the capabilities underneath your authentication for that. As soon as you do that, just like what Julian was saying, you want to get the company ID and you want to get your report suite ID. Those are a little bit harder to come by inside the admin panel in the UI. You can get them, but it's a lot easier. What I've found is when you pull in the get me function, it's the endpoint for discovery, and it actually pulls in all of your company names that you recognize and your company ID. And so you can easily filter off the company name that you have in your report suite and then pull in the company ID that way. You also would do that with report suites, and you'd be able to pull in exactly what the name was. So in this situation, our report suite was SDI Website 2020 Production. I pulled that directly from the UI and then filtered this, and I was able to pull in the report suite ID. The option here with the package is to get you rolling as quick as possible, so you don't have to add these two variables every time you run a function call in R, in the R package. You can just save these two variables, again, restart your session, and then the functions, all the functions that need one or both of these will recall that. If you work with multiple companies, you're probably not going to want to do this. You're going to want to save these items in your actual R Markdown or R document. In the actual function call like I have here in the report suites, but you don't necessarily have to have it because as you can see, this is the copy paste from the hard-coded function actually is referencing that. So using that, Julian, last week I didn't have it, but now I do. So I wanted to point that out. I do have the user call now, and this does give you the 15 different variables that come with the users. It defaults to 10, but you can get up to 1,000 and pull in those users from there. But we wanted to go in from the user list to the segments. And this is one of the segments and calculated metrics are created dynamically many times. And when they are created that way, you can pull in thousands of them if you have a long-standing account. So therefore, you want to streamline as much as possible. And so there's a lot of different variables and arrays that the API has for us to be able to filter off of. So we can use the report suite ID. A lot of times with segments, if I'm creating a complex segment, Adobe recommends this. I found it incredibly valuable. I'll go in, create the segment in the UI, and then I will tag it or give it a particular name, and I'll run my tag name filter and then run this. It'll pull in my segment, and then I'll be able to get the ID, which many times is very complex. It's not a short 3 number that you can memorize. It's quite a complex code. Same thing with calculated metrics, but it'll pull in all this information with your different segments. It'll actually give you the definition. Now it pulls it in as a separate embedded data frame inside or a JSON string inside that data frame that it returns or the list that it returns. So you can definitely copy these definitions, and that is where the complexity of the new API comes in. But it also allows us to have the control, right? That we can duplicate these. In fact, one of my coworkers took this and was able to duplicate a segment using the API, for 80 different segments that they needed to run based on a demographic group that they were looking for. And they would have had to create that manually. It would have taken a while, but they were able to duplicate that and run this through the API. We don't have that built into this function yet, but it has that capability. And Julian, I think you have something else that you've built even on top of this as far as the segments and calculated metrics go.
Yes, I will now share again my screen.
We'll get better at the screen transition. Maybe.
Maybe. Okay, yeah, that's so what Ben showed you was one of the use case, and I think it's very valuable. I think the API is very used. I saw in the QA already some question, and I think the API are very a lot of usage when you want to scale your implementation, and that's how you do it with the API, because then you don't need to do that manually. One of the other things, so you actually scale a lot, and the problem of scaling a lot is that you don't know what's going on. And what a very particular use case we find in very often is that you have duplicate segment, and through the API you can actually check how many duplicate segments you have. So I will do that with those 2 lines of code. You don't need to understand them as such. I'll go through them quickly. So first I retrieve all of the segments, and you can see that I'm showing them all here. It's my own application, so it's only 4 of them. And you see that I have Python and Python 2. And to make things even clearer, it's my duplicate segment of Python. So someone, it could be anyone in your company, actually take your segment and copy it and move it over, and it's just the same definition, but you don't know that, and it just stack up, and you end up with 20,000 segments. What you could do, because it's a data frame, you could change those definition here that you have retrieved to put them as a string, because you need to compare strings. And then through a data frame, you can directly find the duplicates. And here, what I'm doing is I'm just finding the duplicates with the data frame method, and pull the name and which one are duplicates. We'll have a Boolean set to true. And you see that Python and Python 2 are true because they are duplicates of each other. So then you can clean up, you have much more information with the date created and so on. So this is a very valuable use case I found for a lot of companies to clean up their environment, make it easier for people to find what they want and to find the most valuable segment. Another very important use case we have about dimension segment and so on is that when you want to work with virtual report suite. I don't know if everyone is aware of virtual report suite. They are actually trimming your data to a specific set of elements. And you can actually get, obviously, those report suite with the get virtual report suite element. But more importantly, you can get actually extended information about this. So you can see the date and the setup and so on. And you can even know in the virtual report suite, you can curate your elements. You can say, I don't want this dimension to be there, or this event that you are tracking to be in that virtual report suite, because I don't want to confuse user, or the user don't have access to those data for some reason. And through that get virtual report suite component that come from actually people contributing to the project, we have actually the component that have been added to that report suite. And I want just to shout out here to Lucas Oldenburg that I've developed, based on this API, a manager of virtual report suites through Google Sheet. So I encourage you to go through his Twitter account, and he has linked his demo there. So those are very administrative elements that we are running through the API. So you can do that either in R or in Python. And when you get to the API and to Adobe Analytics, obviously, at some point, you want to get your data. So this is one part of the Adobe Analytics API that we are going to cover. And you see that we have a different view on this. I'm much more raw, and Ben will have a very cool feature to show. So going quickly into mind, there is a get report method that you can retrieve from your elements. So you can actually get, there is a video about it, how you can retrieve a JSON data request. So it's a bit complex. We will see that in the next, I will show it here. But you can retrieve that directly from Adobe Analytics. And imagine you want to run that every day or every second day. Then you just use the API to retrieve this information. In my case, I'm returning a dictionary for anyone familiar with Python, with much more information, which segment has been used and so forth. But the data that you want are in the data key. So if I'm running that, I directly get the data with my 90 days, so from 0 to 89. And you can run that as well if you want with directly the dictionary definition. So I said it's a bit more complex. So this is my report suite. What do I want to retrieve? So page views, visit. So actually what is going to be retrieved, visit and page views here, and so forth. So it's exactly the same request showing here, but this time it's not reading the JSON, it's passing this dictionary, my request directly here. So it's much more raw. So I will hand over to Ben, so he will show his R capability, and he has a very cool feature on that.
All right. So you can see my R code again, Julian. Just making sure. Okay,
Yes.
great. So I did want to backtrack just a little bit through the dimensions. One of the neatest, I don't know if that's the right term, really great features that I've seen is that now classifications are combined in our dimensions API endpoint. And so now we can pull in the dimensions. And as you see here with campaign, you have campaign.1, .2, .3. This is the classifications of our tracking code. And so any EVARs that you have classifications on are now in line. And so you can now see that without having to pull an extra report. It's very, very helpful. You have that with dimensions. You have metrics API pull as well, which is very helpful. So all of these now we're able to pull in separately, as you saw with calculated metric and segments, similar to what you can do inside Analysis Workspace, where you have it on the left-hand column and they're all available for you. A lot of times what I'll do is I'll have a function call that I'll run, a source file that I'll run that will pull in these metrics when I get started, because I'm using that as in my analysis as I go through and referencing what dimensions and metrics I have available to me. But pulling data is where we're at. So I also have the same type of report. That was where we kind of started. There's a great video. I think Jen has a great video on how to pull in the JSON file. It's super easy. It's in the workspace, and we can share that link in our send out after this. So you can see how to pull that JSON file and just run that. You save it as a .json file and then reference that, and then you're able to pull in your report. The single report by day is pretty straightforward. You have date range day, date range hour, date range month. You have those date ranges you can use to break down by dimension. And so this is a simple report. Again, it does not take very long to pull this data. It pulls it in very quickly. Obviously, this is just pulling in a small amount of data. The greatest feature for the API is you're no longer dimension bound. So you can use, this is a representation of just 5 dimensions. Right now, the R package actually supports up to 20 different dimension breakdown. I've had a hard time figuring out how to test up to 20 dimension breakdown. So if you have a 20 dimensional breakdown you've been wanting to do, this is the chance, right? Now, again, it goes back to the complexity. It can build, and you can all of a sudden have a 14-hour time frame before your data comes back. It compiles it because you're calling every single one of those dimensions. Each breakdown gives you another API call, so it gets pretty complex. But this pulls in some pretty easy to find data or easy data. It breaks it down multi-level. And I think I have it in the console actually. So let me pull this up. So it shows you how long it's estimated to run. This should take about 13 seconds. It's about 3/4 of a second per API call, depending on system and the API itself and the feedback. This is pulling a total of 15 rows. And in those rows, then you have that breakdown across the different levels. And so you can see it breaks it down by the visits. And it doesn't give you a breakdown for each one of those dimensions as it calls it. It throws that away and only takes the top, whatever you have mentioned. In this, it's taking the top 2 of every single one of the dimensions. So there's a lot of documentation on how to write these function calls to where you can get it to it looks nice, and actually pulls in the data accurately, the way you're looking for. But there's also the other component, which is a lot of times in our markdown with what we're trying to do is trying to report back to a client or to someone in-house who wants to view this or get a spreadsheet, and they're not going to recognize EVAR 21, right? They're not going to recognize the calculated metric code, which is 16 or so long. No, it's longer than that, I think, digits and numeric, alphanumeric. So what you want to do is you want to make sure that these are pretty. You're not going to want to do it in your analysis, trust me, because you want to actually capture what this name is and do another function call at some point. But you want to make it pretty. So I have what we have is a pretty name call, and what that does is actually pulls in the pretty names for date range day or page, and mobile device type. In this situation, it's not a huge change, but if you're using calculated metrics, then it will be that big of a change. I probably shouldn't have just rerun it. I probably should have just left it. But anyway, so it capitalizes it, and this is the way it would look inside your Adobe instance, where each one of these items would show up that way with capital letters, and you can more easily recognize it that way. So with the multi-dimension, I do want to bring in the anomaly reporting, which was available in 1.4, but it does have, I think, some capabilities inside the new API that gives you new opportunities to be able to pull this data in. Anomaly reporting is one of those features as an analyst you're just very careful and cautious about, because you don't want to be chasing a rabbit that's actually a dog and will turn around and bite you instead, if that analogy makes sense. So you want to be careful how you pull it. But we do have the capabilities to pull in the anomaly detection. This is the last 90 days, and it shows you upper bound, lower bound, expected, and then true or false. Well, sometimes this is not where you want to be, right? You want to be able to say, okay, which ones were true over the time frame of 365 days. And so what we have is we have a quick view equals true function call. And so when you do this, it actually returns your data set, complete data set, so you can use it as a list. The second item of that list that it returns is going to be all the items that are true. And then finally, it shows the visual breakdown with each one of these dots showing where the anomaly took place and outside the upper and lower bound. So this is a cool feature, but the neatest part about this is that you can run, let's hope it runs this time. It won't. What did I do wrong? Unauthorized. All right, anyway, that's why, because it's blank. Don't mess with your code before you present. So in this situation, it runs it for every single one of the metrics. So visits, then it gives me the breakdown by visits, the breakdown by visitors, the breakdown by visitors there, and then it gives me those two reports back, so the visuals. I've done up to 5 different metrics at one time, and you're able to spit that back. So there's some neat nuances between anomaly detection. There's also other features in the API that we haven't even touched on. Julian, I know we've had some really cool conversations about what the possibilities are in the new API. But so far, that pretty much covers it. Do you want to touch on real fast before we take questions on the data repair API?
Yeah,
I mean, you mentioned it.
So the data repair API. So we have the. I'm also supporting. I think I'm not sure if you in R, but the bulk data insertion API and the data insertion API. But we won't display that now.
I haven't supported it yet with R yet. A lot of management piece I haven't gone into. So
the one that none of us are actually supporting at the moment is the data repair API. This capability is to delete elements from your report suite and from your data. At the moment, what you can do is you select the dimension. So Adobe Analytics is EVAR or prop, so EVAR 1 or prop 1, and then you select a time frame, and it deletes everything. From insider source, I know that this capability will be improved in the future, so I will wait a bit before using it if you can. Sometimes you cannot. And then I believe Ben and I will actually add this capability. We also learn, I want to say that you may have all heard of the new customer journey analytics that is coming from Adobe based on platform. So it's like Adobe Analytics, but for platform or on your data system. And most of their API will be based on the 2.0. So as Ben was saying before, 2.0 API is the future. If you now are working with it, you will get even better for all of the different API coming in the future from Adobe, because they basically will look similar the same and have the same capability.
Yeah, great. All right. So there's some use cases for you. I'm going to skip through this real quick. So AdobeAnalyticsR.com is the URL for the new R package. It's been out to the public for about 3 weeks, 4 weeks. And we're getting some really good feedback, but I could definitely use some more help as far as finding out what features are important. The new user segment or the new user API call was actually a request that I got that I didn't even think anybody would necessarily use right off the bat. And it's a super simple fix that we were able to include. So if you find something, use the issues block and submit that issue, and we'll get that done. And we'll try and get it done as quick as possible. Julian, what about your package?
So my package is available on GitHub and also on so directly in the pipeline module. So you can do a pipe install, analytics too, and then you get started directly after this call. As Ben said, I'm also always looking forward to have new contributors. I already have some, so I mentioned Lucas that gave some recommendation, but all other people. And I'm not only, I mean, I guess Ben neither. We are not only looking for technical user, but also people that wants to add more use cases or have ideas or documentation a gap, that anything that you think, oh, it's not clear or anything, yeah, please reach to us. None of them are owned by any company. So as I said, I'm working for Adobe, but it's not an Adobe official package. So it won't be, if you go to customer care for Adobe and ask for support, they won't help you. So that's to say, but definitely it's something that I believe is everyone helping. It can make a very good package and help you help a lot of people.
Yeah, that's a good call out. These are both open source packages, and so they're not supported by any company or anybody else. We're working on the side trying to get these ramped up because we understand how valuable they are for the community, but also we use it in our work. So something we're trying to work up. All right, Adam, we went over by 2 minutes from plan.
Okay, no worries. Thank you guys so much. While we're going through the questions, you may want to jump back to your first slide that had your contact info. I always find that to be helpful. So we have tons of questions. We'll get through as many as we can now, and the rest we'll see if we can answer. I'm sure folks will want to know if they can have links to some of the stuff you posted here. So hopefully you guys are okay posting a PDF of your slides into the Slack group. So you could either do that yourself or give it to me. So let's kind of start from the top and work our way down for the questions. And I'll recommend we do short answers, as short as we can, since we have a lot of questions. Will this Jupyter notebook be available? So I think that's probably the stuff you were going through.
Yeah, on my side, definitely I can share that to you, Adam, and then I don't know how you want to share that. Otherwise, I will upload it on my GitHub. That's also possible.
Cool. Yeah, we can probably just put it in the Slack group. The next one, which disadvantages do you see using 2.0 versus 1.4? When would you recommend using 1.4 over 2.0?
I'm going to jump in here. From the analyst standpoint, if you're analyzing data, if you're not managing your report suite or your account through the API, get into 2.0. There's so many more capabilities. I've been using it for, like I said, the last 4 months with multiple different clients, and it's been incredibly helpful. Now, I didn't do a lot with managing yet segments through the old API or any type of marketing channels or any data warehouse exports. So if you're doing any of that, then stick with the 1.4 for the time being, but that support is going to change. 2.0 is coming along very quickly. So it'd behoove you to get comfortable with the new 2.0 in either open source or another source that you have.
Okay, next one. When you pull the segments, does the data returned let you know if that segment is being used in either workspace or data warehouse or report builder?
I can jump on that. I have the capability on beta to have this, and actually the Lucas Oldenburg Google Sheet I share, I talk about is capable of showing that you do have, so it does exist. We didn't show it because it's in beta. It's not supported neither by Adobe. So it's there. So the answer, yes,
Yeah.
it's there. It's not. You have a look at the documentation in my API because it's nowhere else.
Yeah, and speaking of Julian, I have also asking and begging and pleading. I mentioned Lucas to do his Google Sheet thing that you mentioned, Julian. I'm hoping that Lucas will agree to come and do that and demo what the cool thing that he's built on an SDEC session, because it's really cool. Okay, next one. Oh, I'm sorry, Ben, did you want to answer that for your package as well?
Yeah, I'm showing the data that I have included with the API. There's a lot of expansion components that we're pulling in. I don't know how much has been developed in Julian, but he would know more than on that front, I think, as far as that goes. But definitely, you can explore these and see where you have the identification. So.
Yeah, it's definitely a need. I had one company I was working with, and they had 30,000 segments, and they were kind of sure that maybe one or two of them might be duplicates. Next one is the definition of a duplicate that you here that you copied a segment over, or is it a duplicate if all of the values in the segment are the same?
So the question, I guess, is the logic the same, or the raw value are the same? So you need to have the same value as well. So if you have the same logic but different values, so for example, you have a country France and one is the same, it's country but Poland, then it will be two different segments, even if they are using the same dimension.
Okay. The next question, is there a cost for each API call?
Nope.
And are there any limits that someone needs? Any limits? Is there a certain number of tokens, or is it throttled in any way?
Yes, there is a throttle of 12 API calls per 6 seconds, so 2 per second.
Okay.
Yeah, you probably won't hit it very often. The way the package, I know the R package, and Julian, I think you've done it as well, where you'll hit it every once in a while and get a 429 error or something, but in the R package, it'll re-ask. So you won't hit that throttle very often.
Okay, next one. We've been pulling classification data for tracking codes via 1.4, as 2.0 doesn't have quite the same abilities yet, but I'm wondering what your thoughts are on pulling that data via 2.0 and how you might go about doing that.
I think, and I've got the screen, Julian, so I'm going to share every time I go through this.
Go ahead.
So I think what we saw with the dimensions is that you actually pull in the classifications within the dimension, and you can filter off of anything that would include maybe an ID that would include a .1. I've done this because I understand company or campaign is actually the one I was looking for, but you can pull in any category that equals classifications. There's several different ways you can do it, but it will pull it all the way through. Your list of dimensions can be pretty substantial. So in this one, it's 287 rows. That's a small account.
Okay, Julian, anything to add to that, or you good?
No, okay. I'm very good with that.
Okay, next one. Are there any recommendations or tips around leveraging the API to pull data from real-time reports? Using API version 1.4, I had to slow down the pulling process, fetching data every minute. Does API 2.0 add some capabilities for this so the data can be pulled out continuously, or the connection can be kept for a longer period of time? I know this might be an edge case, but I'm interested in fetching real-time data.
As a consultant, I would say it depends what you call real time.
I think they mean what Adobe classifies as real time in the real time reports in the old analytics and reports interface.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. In that case, you are calling a different endpoint, which is a live stream API, which is even not 1.4, not 2.0, and the 2.0 doesn't have this capability.
Okay, so not yet. Ben, is that something that you have on your horizon, or is that something you need Adobe's help to do?
Once they open that endpoint up on 2.0, that is something that a lot of people are asking for. Yeah.
Okay.
So hopefully soon.
Okay, next question. When you pull in multiple dimensions, how do you set it up so that you can do multi-dimensional analysis? For example, the sum of visits by country, state, city equals the total visits for that country in Adobe. I suspect the answer may be aligned to session-based versus visitor-based attributes, but you'll likely have some thoughts based on your experience.
There's a lot there, I think. So I'll just hit on the top portion, which is use Analysis Workspace when you're pulling the API when you first get going. We've done a lot of comparison on how we pull the data and what it looks like, and then the end result on the total versus the total number of rows and the individual row items. When you first get started, it's always good to have one screen open on Analysis Workspace, run drag and drop all your elements, and then recompare it when you run it in your API call. And when you do that, you're going to find that they match up. So if you can produce it inside Adobe Analysis Workspace, you can make that same call, and it's going to be structured the same exact way on this side. That seemed like a really packaged question that I probably didn't totally unpack, especially the time. So feel free to reach out to both me and Julian on either the Slack channel or in Measure Slack especially, and we'll see what we can do to answer those.
Cool. Awesome. Well, we are at time. So thank you all for joining, and especially thanks to Julian and Ben. This is awesome. Thanks for sharing all of your hard work and your wisdom. And if anyone has any other questions, go into the SDEC Slack group. But Julian, Ben, thank you so much.
Our pleasure.
Our pleasure.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, everyone, have a
Have a great day.
wonderful rest of the week, everyone.